Hi everybody, welcome to Talking Automotive with Mark and John, where we talk about everything automotive. My name's John Sinclair and my co-host Mark Pellavestra.
Hi John, today we've got Tony Foon. Tony has 40 years experience in the automotive aftermarket part of the business. He is an author, a facilitator, a trainer, and he mastered the art of service management.
Yeah, a really interesting discussion because he goes into a lot of detail about what we can do as an industry to attract and retain technicians, which is such an important part of our business to ensure profitability for the future.
Remember to subscribe to our channel, hit the bell below, follow us on LinkedIn, iTunes, Spotify, and also visit our website at autocurrents.com.
So let's jump into it.
With 30 years' experience in auto logistics and state-of-the-art locations in 5 major Australian cities, Precar Fleet Services is an independent division of Precar Services, offering specialty fleet fit-outs for commercial applications ranging from simple tray and tow bar fitments to fully bespoke service body and accessory installation. With quality-assured safety, compliance and standardisation of vehicle builds, Precar Fleet Services are a premier all-in-one solutions provider for commercial vehicle fleet operators, leasing companies, and original equipment manufacturers. For further information on how Precar Fleet Services can assist in solving your commercial vehicle fit-out needs, please visit precar.com.au and click on the link to Fleet Services.
Fleet managers and their drivers are often lost when it comes to motor vehicle accidents, and knowing what the next steps are can be confusing. We hold your driver's hand every step of the process. At Innovation Group, we process claims right the first time. Innovation Group provides motor claims management, assessing, and accident management services. Our experienced team of people are there to make it easier for the fleet manager and the driver by minimizing touch points between all stakeholders. Innovation Group, leaders in motor accident claims management.
Hi Tony, welcome to the show. Great to have you on. We really appreciate you joining us. Maybe just to kick things off, can you just tell us briefly a little bit about Tony Foon and what your background is?
Thanks, John. Thanks, Mark. I'm 41 years in the industry, in the motor industry. I started from apprentice back in 1979. Worked through every facet of the business from apprentice right up until general service manager running dealerships and multi-franchises. I was born in South Africa, lived in Canada for 10 years, and I came to Australia in 2000, just before the 2000 Olympics. So I've been here for roughly about 21 years. What I do now is I'm a facilitator, a coach, consultant, and also author. Just published a book called The Art of Service Management. So I just thought to myself, I'll put the 41 years of experience on paper and let people laugh at the mistakes I make. If you want to make the same mistakes, you go for it. But it's to show people that there is a better way. And sometimes it's not only my way or your way, there's another way. So that's me in a nutshell.
So Tony, question for me is, where do you see the current state of play with regards to service technicians? You've come up from the floor, so you've started as a tech. Where do you see the state of play with technicians and their skills?
You know, if you compare technicians to 20 years or 25 years ago, it was basically a career. You know, people would, I know I'll speak for myself, you know, I started as an apprentice, went through a service technician, then got my master status and then was able to travel, then became a foreman and all that sort of. So for me, it was a career more than a job. I think the technicians, if you do the comparison today between, 20 years ago and now, it's more of a job, it doesn't pay or it does pay or, I'm not making a career out of it. It's just a job basically at the end of the day. So, and look, it's got something to do with the generation too. I think that's a big part because, myself coming back those days, it's you just had to listen and you do what as you're told. But today it's a different story. It's, whether the kids are actually smarter than when we were, I'm not sure, and they're asking more questions, whereas we didn't ask questions.
I suppose, and just flowing on from that, because I'm from a similar background, I think you started a year before me. I started in December 1980 as a technician. So I understand your background and feel your pain as the just do it and you're told what to do. So do you feel from a generational perspective there's that change? And has the technology also compounded that change as well, as far as the state of play with the technicians?
Absolutely. People says, what opportunities are there in the industry? Well, when I started as 18, 19-year-old, I never thought I'll be where I am today. I mean, for me, it was just work hard, just put your head down and create those opportunities. Whereas, I guess, again, I'm not antagonizing the younger generation, but I think people just want things to happen overnight. I don't want to go through the 5-year apprenticeship. Why can't I do it now? Not understanding that had I not done those last 20 or 30 years in the dealer, I wouldn't be able to talk about this. I wouldn't be able to coach or consult. Or I think it's important. The knowledge has changed as well, because you create your opportunities, you create the knowledge today. But then also, in saying that, Mark, it's about technology. Technologies and social media has played a massive part.
Tony, so what do you think are the biggest challenges for both OEMs and dealers from a service technical perspective?
Well, technology obviously is one. Okay, I think roles are going to be more specialized in the future, especially with the electric cars need. It's not just your average mechanic or technician working on it. They need to be specialized. Do I want a job in the future? Well, if you do, then part and parcel of being a service technician is to get your electrification certificate. And I remember the days, John, where you got people that wanted to be qualified to be technicians and people that were just happy working on vehicles. They were called, I think, repair shop assistants or something. They never got a trade. They were just slugging away, doing the oil services, brakes. They were happy with that. And, you always get those kind of people, but there'll be less opportunities for them, obviously, at the end of the day. For the OEMs is whether people are wanting to enter into the field to actually do this extra electrification, because you have to be a technician first and then go one step further.
So with EVs, with those specialist roles that their techs need to do, I can just drill down a bit further. So what does that involve?
No longer talking about the mechanical side of the vehicle. You've got these massive batteries, and these batteries, believe it or not, they can actually kill you. It's one of those things that you've got to actually learn about, the basics of it, then the fundamentals of it, what you've got to do to maintain it. And then there's a safety aspect of working on these cars, not only from a safety point of view, but from an environmental point of view as well, because you can imagine that if you've got a certain percentage of electric vehicles, you're going to have massive amounts of batteries. How do you dispose them in a way so that you don't hurt the environment? And then also something where you enclose these electric batteries and those type of things. And then there's special tools that go with it as well. It's not just your normal mechanical tools, it's electrical tools. And then to diagnose it properly as well. That's the other thing, because the batteries aren't cheap. It's probably the price, half the price of the vehicle. There's a lot involved and a lot of things to think about. It's going to get difficult, and then it's going to plateau, and then it's going to be a smooth sailing. But to get there, like everything else, when you start off, you're going to have your teething problems.
Because another one that I'm keen to ask you, having come through a similar situation. So you started in the 1970s. Now in the 70s, we're looking at fuel systems involved, carburetors. There was a bit of diesel around, but diesel was mainly for heavy commercial vehicles. There wasn't a lot of diesel in passenger. So you've had this transition of, even electronic ignition was a big thing, because I think back in the 70s, you still had plugs and points. And then fuel injection came along with carburetors phased out. So there's a lot of that old school tech that has disappeared, and it's only really found in aftermarket repair shops. That knowledge, as that sort of drops away, and then airbag technology came in, and then ABS technology, even the fact the electrics have changed, where back in the day, I dare say when you first started, you could take a test light and just plug a test light push it into a wire and check for voltages, if it would light up. Now you do that, you blow the control module. All of this sort of stuff, that tech, has the industry struggled to keep up with that, and especially now that it's transitioning from all this internal combustion knowledge and training and all the complexity that goes with internal combustion to be now a totally different technology, a whole different set of things that are going to kill you, because internal combustion engines killed you as well, with carbon monoxide, getting burnt from exhausts, getting zapped from high energy ignition systems. And getting fuel catching fire and burning and having horrific burns and breathing in asbestos dust. So now we've got this other technology. How is that going to be integrated, and how do you teach it and B, maintain that knowledge base?
Things change, right? I mean, we're in the era of technologies. It's a matter of how the industry is going to embrace this now, because it's not going to be overnight. By 2040, within another 20 years or so, I think 85% of vehicles globally will be electric. I mean, in some European countries, it is already reaching that. For us to take that on, it's going to be a big change. There's going to be a lot of changes. There are definitely a lot of changes in terms of, whether people are going to embrace this. The young generation, this is something new for them. So they're going to have to embrace this electric cars. It's something that they want to do. And I think for some people, it will be great. For others, it's going to be like, whoa, this is just too hard for me.
But Tony, don't you think all those skills that we have now for combustion engines, those people are going to retire and leave the industry? And so not having those skills anymore, it's just going to force the change. So it's going to get to a tipping point where we just don't have enough skills in the industry to continue servicing combustion engines, and people then just going to have to convert across to electric engines.
Like I said, John, it's going to be about another 20 years before that's going to happen. I think there will always be that, 5% floating around. You ask a young kid today coming out of school, what is a carburetor? What's a points and condensers, stuff like that. They would have no clue. They would have absolutely no clue. And why should they? Because, the times have changed, right? For them, yes, it will be easy. For the older generation, and you're quite right, there will be a forced change. But I reckon sort of 15, 20 years, a lot of people are talking electrification and they think it's next year or the year after or next 5 years. I think the world will start embracing. Well, when I say the world, I'm talking about Australia. Say, you know what, it's here, guys.
So, Tony, what do you think dealers and OEMs can do to attract service technicians to the industry? And how do we make it a sexy career to get involved with?
Right. Firstly, they've got to look at technicians from a different point of view. That days, and I'm going to use that word, grease monkey or your mechanic. These are going to be your future of your brand, of your company. So when you say make it sexy, you've got to support them, but also give them incentives. I talk to a lot of people in America, and they've got obviously the same problems and same question. How do we get technicians of the future? And a lot of them are actually doing ads that give the younger generation something to think about. Why go to university and have a hex fee of X amount of dollars when you become an apprentice and start earning money? And those are the sort of things that they need to start promoting. Tell them that it's a career and it's not just a job. I think the difference between the two, Mark, is they look at it as a job, not a career. And they need to turn that around and say, you've got a career. This is what you can do. They need to see this clear pathway.
So the OEMs and the dealers need to show that you can join this business, start off as an apprentice, and then you can ascend to be, if you go down the dealer path, you can ascend to be the foreman, or first a master tech, then a foreman, then a service advisor, then a service manager, and then maybe a group service manager, and then maybe a group general manager, and then maybe even a dealer principal.
Exactly. I know 2 DPs in my 40 years that's from the after sales, only 2. So I was very fortunate to meet them, and they understand the business because they've been there, right? It's one of those things where if you come through the business, you got to create that. But a lot of people don't. You see, they kind of just see it as a job, and they think, oh well, as soon as somebody poaches me, more money, I'm gone. I remember the days when I was a manager, a lot of technicians started leaving. They were laying roof tiles for another $200-300 a week more. Why wouldn't you go? So we've got to try and combat that. I think we need to start increasing the salaries. You look at a tradesperson like a plumber or an electrician, they earn a lot of money being an apprentice. So they need to treat us, I guess, in some way, shape or form on the same level, if not better, because at the end of the day, that's the wheels make the world go round, they say. And not only the OEMs, I think the governments need to get involved, Mark. I think the governments need to put some sort of huge incentive. They need to look at this as a bonus. Otherwise, it's going to be tough to get these people coming out of school. What's the difference of going to work in a restaurant and being a waiter? What career is that? Whereas here, I have a career.
Tony, do you think it's done the industry a disservice being able to get technicians coming in from, say, Philippines and these top areas where we've used it maybe to keep the salaries at a lower level? Do you think that's impacted the industry at all?
Absolutely. But give your own people in your backyard the opportunity to do it, right? I'm a great believer of growing your own apprentices as opposed to, buying them, so to speak, right? And I think we are our own worst enemy. We did it to ourselves by doing that. We don't want to pay that much. We want to make a lot of money, sure. So we keep our costs down. The only way you're going to keep the cost down is get people to come in that want to come in, support them and pay them less money, and then, problems by doing that. I believe growing your own, making sure that at the end of the day, you've got somebody that's qualified, you've got a homegrown person, but pay the person. It's like everything else. We don't work for peanuts, and rightfully we shouldn't. We have a skill. Talk about electrification, that's even going to be more of a challenge for people to get technicians now. I tell you what's going to happen though, John and Mark, I tell you, people are going to start using the same old scenario. They're going to start poaching people and pay big bucks. We're our own worst enemy. So we need to start working together. Let's try and work together instead of buying it or poaching it. And look, you're always going to get one individual that's going to move $50 more. That you're not going to stop. But at least treat the person or grow them in such a way that they don't want to leave.
And another question, Tony, you mentioned the government's role in all this. So we have dealers, we have OEMs, and as John and I discussed with Stuart Charity, the size of the aftermarket is huge. It is just massive, and you think of the average age on Australian roads of a car is 10.4 years. And in fact, which means there's a lot of cars that are 20 years old that still have older tech that needs to be maintained. So do you feel there are enough resources to train technicians from a government training perspective? Or is it very much up to the OEMs to train the techs and then that cascades down through the industry?
I think the OEMs should be training the techs, because they're specializing in a certain brand. Where the government should be involved is supporting the OEMs in terms of giving them some sort of incentive to make sure that there is people entering our workforce. But more importantly, to the individuals. I remember years ago, they used to give an incentive to apprentice up until they're about third year, where they pay them as they come in as a first year. Every week they gave them so much, if I can remember right. And the second year they increased it, and the third year they increased it, and they gave them a 2 allowance. That's all stopped now. That's all stopped. It's as though the taps just run dry. Why? At that stage, we're still getting people coming into the workforce that wanted to be working in the industry. The other thing I want to emphasize too, we put a lot of emphasis, Mark and John, on technicians, right? But I can tell you right now, there's a lot of dealers that are struggling to get service advisors. To me, being a ex-service advisor many years ago, I can tell you that's also a very specialized position, because it's very underrated. It's like a technician. They're very underrated, but they don't understand that without a good service and a competent service advisor, that can actually make a dealership money. It's worth its weight in gold, because when the customer likes somebody, they will keep coming back, and if they keep coming back, they'll keep buying the same brand.
Tony, do you think there's any opportunity on the type of work the technicians do when they first get in? Is there something, if we got them doing this particular work, could be more interesting for them, and to use that as a way to attract the technicians in, or is that not possible?
That is possible. The other side of the coin, and I'm going to tell you this now, and I'll tell you this from the bottom of my heart, because being an apprentice, the first day when I got in, day one, I started working on a vehicle. Day one, and I remember what stuff up and made from day one, day two. I started working on the car. A lot of managers today, and I've seen it over and over again in the last 30, 35 years, is they hire this young kid that wants to be a technician, and then for the first 2 to 3, maybe possibly 2 to 3, not even weeks, months, he is sweeping the workshop, right? He's cleaning, he's sweeping the workshop, he's a gopher, he goes, gets this, he goes get that type of thing. And I couldn't believe it. For the life of me, I'm thinking to myself, well, hang on, you've just ruined this kid, because his ambition is he wants to come work on a vehicle. You haven't given him a span. All you've done is just giving him jobs that I guess if you hire somebody cheaper would have done a better job because they're more specialized. This kid wants to work on a vehicle and you haven't given the opportunity. So what does that kid do? After 3 months, he goes home and tells his folks, says, you know what, go and do something else. You've lost a potential good kid, right? And breaks my heart. Seriously, it breaks my heart. I used to give my workshop foreman, my team leader or workshop controller, I used to give them so much slack about it. Why is a guy cleaning? Oh, yeah, because we don't have anything for him to do that needs to be cleaned. I said, no, he's here for a reason. He's not here to clean. I don't pay him. Yes, sure enough, it's cheap labor, but he's here to learn. He's here to learn, and that puts a lot of people off. So I'm not saying that every manager is like that. The sad thing about that is, though, when the kid finishes year 3 or year 4 and then he or she becomes qualified, they don't really have the skill. And then who do we blame? We can't blame the kid because you're only as good as your tools you use. And I guess at the end of the day, we have to look back and say, well, that's 4 years wasted.
That is so profound, actually, Tony, what you just described. I've seen, and I've actually lived it many, many times and seen it many times. The apprentice, the first year, it's okay, get the broom out, get the lunch orders. But a very clever first year apprentice dealers can make good money out of the morning tea and the lunch orders.
You know, Mark, what people don't realize, and I'm talking about dealers, is that first year is costing you, let's say, I'm just going to use some stupid figures, $10 an hour, let's say, for example, right? You pay him $10 an hour. But that hour, you are charging, what is it, $300 an hour? You know, some dealers, let's say a premium dealer, $250 to $300 an hour. You're paying the guy $10 an hour. You're making, you know what I mean? If you charge $300, you're making $290, right? Who in his right mind would want somebody to sweep the floor and give, I don't know. I for the life of me, I don't understand that. It's a win-win situation. He's working on the vehicle. You're making money.
So, Tony, what opportunities do you see for the future of the motor industry?
I still see a future for the industry. I mean, there will always be a future. As long as there's wheels and it's turning, there will always be a future. How bright will it be? Well, I think it depends on the individual, but also depends on the heads to start thinking now and not only, maybe have a different and a broader view and a different attitude of how do we start treating these people to make sure they stay. Let's train them so that they want to stay, not train them so that they want to actually leave. So treating them with, I guess, with love, with the old TLC, tender loving care, but also motivating them. There's a career path for them, give them that opportunity to ensure that they go down that way. For the OEMs and dealers, what do we need to do to start thinking for the next 10 years? What projects are we going to put in place? Create those opportunities for the technicians on how we're going to embrace them as well. But we've got to also think about advisors, using the skills to get more and more customers in through the doors. They're very important. They work long hours. Dealers itself, they just need to take a broader view of the people that are in there and say to themselves, if we didn't have these kind of people in here, where would we be? And if we want to be somewhere right up there in the near future, how do we actually make these people feel like they're part of it?
But I think, Tony, you make a good point. I think everybody likes to be respected and feel that they're contributing and being part of the organization. As soon as you're not, if you're just coming up, as you say, as a job, then you're going to lose interest and you're going to be happy to move on for $10 or $20 more an hour. So I think that's a really good point there.
Now, Tony, I'm keen to find out more about your book. You mentioned before that you want people to learn about the good and bad things in the industry from a service perspective. You really got me curious. I want to know, what are the good and bad things?
We'll put it this way. Look, there'll always be managers out there, right? There'll always be managers managing people, because at the end of the day, you need somebody to be accountable for a department. So there'll be managers. Now, managers of the past used to look at intelligence, the IQ, right? They looked at IQ and say, it's how much you know, it's how much you're worth. Up until probably about 15 years ago, EQ tapped in, emotional intelligence. So that's changed from, we don't care how much you know, we just want to know how much you care. Now with pandemic, I think with this COVID-19, I think what's going to happen is it's going to go one step further. It's going to be more for a mental side of things now, because of what's, all the depression and what's happening with a lot of things. Managers, yes, they have to be empathetic and be emotional, connected with you, but at the same time, they need to be able to be mindful of mental awareness. SQ, which is spiritual intelligence, that's going to be a massive thing going forward. Started my trade, we never had EQ or SQ. It was just intelligence. You have to be smart. Otherwise, you lose it. But today, it's not about the smartness anymore. It's just about how emotional, connected you are to the individual, and how spiritual in some ways of motivating the person to be there for the person. He or she embrace that welcoming and say, you know what, I like to work for this person regardless. The managers need to be involved, not only from a managing point of the business, but the people itself. Without people and processes, you really don't have a business. That's already happening, right? We know that. But in the near future, it's even going to be more of a challenge for managers to keep people.
It's a good point, that, Tony. It's interesting, because I think it's that whole engagement, and as you say, it's more than empathy. It's being able to embrace and attract people.
More so important now because of the mental alertness. This pandemic has played on a lot of people. It's not an easy thing.
It's actually really powerful what you've just said.
Just to you talked about my book, and I just want to emphasize some of the contents. I'm just, we talk about spiritual point of view. How do we actually look after ourselves? Because we stress out, it's a high stress, strong job to be in the service department. It's very demanding. How do we look after ourselves going forward? And I tell you, it's not an easy gig. There's a lot of people that burn out. It's there because I've been, through that, and you think to yourself, wow, man, if you look after yourself and you do the right things and
But I think you're right. It's some of the roles, especially when you're engaging with customers and there's issues on the vehicle, can be very stressful, especially if you're doing from a customer service point of view, or the service manager or service advisor getting involved with. Some of those situations are going to be quite stressful.
Well, you're accountable, right? It stops with you, right? All that kind of stops with you. So you're accountable or responsible for it, regardless of whether your team's made a mistake or, there's something wrong with the product or the brand. You're accountable for that. And it does weigh you down. It eventually does kind of, soak a lot out of you. So you've got to be prepared. You've got to be, mentally, not only, from physical, but mentally prepared. Otherwise, it does drain you.
If you look at the staff retention in a lot of dealerships, I've been in some dealerships and I can name one or two that are absolutely superb. They have very low staff turnover, around 12-13%, which is unbelievable. And then other dealerships that are at 30%. And when you're sitting that high, it's virtually impossible to see it as a career because it's just that staff churn going through. And the amount you're investing in training people and they just learn stuff and then they leave. And I think the other thing too, which is quite important, we haven't really discussed it today, is that continuity for a customer. If a customer comes in for a service and he meets your service advisor and he meets your service manager and he comes back in a year's time and there's new people there, if he gets to know the service manager, the service advisor, that whole customer relationship, the customer loyalty, the customer retention, it's just that much stronger.
Of course, absolutely, 100%. If we go to a restaurant and they keep changing chefs all the time, the food's going to taste different. They changing managers and advisors just tells you what's going through the customer's mind is, did I bring my car to the right place, to the right people? Because they keep changing. And just when you get used to it, then that's why I said to you earlier on about service advisors, they are worth the weight in gold. If they're really good, keep them, because your customers not only is going to come to your dealership, they're going to buy the same brand because they're going to deal with the same person. Whereas if they keep changing, it's no wonder they move on. So for me, service advisors is just as crucial as technicians. So they work on the front side of the business, the technician works on the back end of the business. It's a good combination, and we need to be able to get those wonderful people that look after customers, build rapport with customers, that treat customers with empathy, that care. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, it's about emotional intelligence now. It's about caring.
My first job, I can remember my first day like it was yesterday. It was a hot day. I was terrified. All these mechanics seemed really scary. No one wanted to talk to me. And the foreman was a real gruff German guy, was a World War II veteran, and he knew his stuff. So this guy had rebuilt all sorts of machinery in all sorts of situations. He knew his stuff. And he's one of those mentors that I can relate to from your story. He used to say to me, if I'd make a mistake, he'd say, "Come here, Mark, so I can kick your ass." And I thought, well, why would I want to walk over so you're going to kick my ass? Because if you left a bolt loose or something like that. But I thank him, because through his hard approach on me, I became Apprentice of the Year. And I won a number of awards. So that was something I'm very thankful for him and the other other senior guys that I worked with, because they pushed me along and but also gave me the opportunity. I had the opportunity to do additional training, which then accelerated what I did. But, the irony, even though I was an Apprentice of the Year as a fourth year, when I left, what you said about we released these technicians, because I was a technician, fully qualified, I never forget the feeling thinking, I don't know enough about cars. I'd done amazing things, but I did not feel confident. I left that business and I moved to Melbourne, and it was like, wow, what do I do? Because now I'm one of the big boys. I'm now a qualified technician, and I'm getting a little bit more money, but also there's a lot more responsibility. So that whole journey is like, wow, what do I do next? And then next thing, in a matter of 3 years later, I'm a foreman, and I'm thinking, how the hell do I do this? What do I do? And then I'm suddenly managing people that are 30 years older than me.
Yeah, correct.
It's like, how did this happen?
The funny thing is, Mark, you said you remember clearly on your day one when you're there. I remember clearly on my day one too. And I don't want to say the brand I worked for. The guy said, okay, get out there and just pry that, to put this belt on. It was an air conditioning belt. And I pry the pry bar on where you fill up because those days you can still regas air conditioning. I'm talking back in the late 70s, right? I broke that bolt off. It cost them, I'm talking about those days, 1,200 Rand. I mean, that's a lot of money back then, right? For a compressor. That's the first stuff up that I made. But you know what? They just persevere, and that's when I knew, you know what? One day when I become where they come from, I want to treat apprentices with a great respect, just like I got treated. So I was actually very blessed. You know, I've heard some horror stories about apprentice. I was never greased. I was never that type of thing, right? I was actually very lucky, right? When they talk about that, I'm thinking, I don't know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about, but no, that didn't happen to me. And very, very blessed. And you just reminded me something, Mark. And I worked with a Swiss guy. This guy, I tell you, he had hands. I'm not lying to you, the size of your laptop. Because when he grabbed you like this and held you up like that on one hand, you knew you were in shit.
You can't do that nowadays.
No, absolutely. But those are the days.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned the generational thing, because early in the discussion, you said that there was that expectation that you just shut up and just did it. It was just do your job and just suck it up.
Yeah. Whereas, and I bet you were like that, Mark. I bet you.
Yes. But going forward nowadays, you don't get that. It's like, oh, Harry, you can't be mean to me. I'll take you to HR.
You probably know the school I went to, John, St. John's College in Joburg.
Yes, no, very well.
Yeah, you know very well. Okay, so my dad dumped me there in a boarding school because I was such a naughty shit. Like I was out of control. So he says, the only way to fix you up is put you in boarding school. That was the first time I made my bed at 10 or 11 years old. I made my bed and just making it, right? I just watch other people how they make it. So I make my bed, and the guy came with a flipping iron and said, you know what? If I put an iron on here, it needs to run straight right from the top to the bottom. If it doesn't run straight from and there's kinks on this thing here, you're going to make this bed again. And that's when you realize, you know what? Now you're going to be disciplined and do things properly. And I've always been like that. I've just grown that. So it was a good thing. Sometimes when they hit you between the eyes.
Yes, indeed. I share your optimism, but also your concern. Read the text. I think we as an industry, something has to change, and it's not just for the automotive. It's auto. It's the mechanics. It's the panel beaters. It's the welders and anyone associated with any metal trade in a workshop. For some reason, if your job is to drive to one place and work there, you don't get rewarded as much as the person who gets to drive to different sites. And it's just something that trades just don't. There's an imbalance across the trades.
Correct.
Correct. And I think hopefully we can tell the story. Your story is a very good one. That there is a career path, and I'm not sure the industry's done itself any favours to show that there actually is a career path if you start as an apprentice and you work your way through.
And in my case, I mean, when I decided just to write, it's just something just to keep myself amused on airplanes and in airports when I was traveling overseas doing training and put this together, I thought to myself, you know what? At least this is something that can prove to people that, hey, you know what? It's not just a job. This guy actually did what he did and said what he said to be where he is. So it's not just a job. It's very sad when they look at it as, it's just a job, how much you're going to pay me, and the next guy pays you $50 more, 50 cents more, and you're gone. Because that happens, right? The sad part about it, John and Mark my words, when electrification comes in, some of these OEMs and dealers won't be putting the money to train these electrification technicians to get certified. They will start poaching them. And that's the sad part. We are our own worst bloody enemy.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tony, for telling your story and sharing it with our audience. It's actually quite a similar story I can relate to, very much so. So the Tony Foon story starts as a technician in 1979. So you're an apprentice in South Africa. You then work your way through the ranks. So from an apprentice through to a qualified technician to a master tech, and then you work your way through to be foreman, a controller, then service advisor, service manager, and then you've mastered the art of service management. But you've worked in three continents. You've worked in South Africa, in North America, and now you're in Australia, and you've been here for 20 years. But I thought it was interesting when you covered off, what are the challenges in the service side of the business? Now, the service side of the business is by far the most profitable side of the business, but it's the most important side because people don't buy a car because they buy a car. They buy a car and they maintain the car. So they actually spend more time maintaining their car than they do buying the car. So the most important relationship that you have with the dealership is actually with that service advisor that you go to see at least once a year, maybe twice a year. And hopefully if you don't have lots of warranty stuff, you don't see them more frequently than that. But even when you do, that's the tipping point where the moments of truth happen, when you actually have problems with, and that service advisor can address those issues and allay those concerns and reassure you that you made a good decision to buy that car or own that car. Because what we do, we own cars. We don't just buy them and just get rid of them straight away. We own cars, and the purchase is just the start of that journey. And this is where the service advisor is so important. I think you highlight a very good point that the industry really struggles in attracting and retaining technicians. And fundamentally, the people that are going to maintain these vehicles on the road, because most cars are retained by the first owners 7.8 years. Average age of a car on the road is 10.4 years, so it means that older cars, they need to be maintained, and they're maintained by technicians. And the industry struggles with the attracting and retaining because the rewards aren't necessarily there. There's the financial rewards, but then there's the other rewards of recognition and appreciation. So you mentioned that many a technician will start, or apprentice will start, and they'll be sweeping the floors and washing the boss's car. Now, I relate to that 100% because that was my first couple of days at work. But also I was fortunate enough to be thrown in the deep end and get to rip apart a Jaguar XJ6 engine that overheated. So that was quite a complex job. So there is the two sides of the coin there. But it's that recognition financially and also the recognition from an appreciation perspective that needs to be there. And the career path. Your story, I think, is great because it shows anyone who's considering joining the trade that it's not just a job. And you highlight that in many instances, young kids see this as, well, it's just a job. I could be a waiter, I could be a barista, or I could be a technician, but I'm not going to do it for long term. And that's a shame because we need to upskill these people because cars are quite complicated beasts. There's a lot of technology and the technology is evolving. And you mentioned just in 20 years, and you would forecast within 20 years, the majority of cars being worked on will be electric. And you also forecast, along with John, that we will lose a lot of the techs that have the internal combustion know-how. So how do we keep that knowledge base alive and well so that both types of cars can be maintained? In 20 years, you're right. It sounds like a long time, but for us older guys that are, over 40, 20 years ago with the Sydney Olympics, now that does not feel like 20 years ago. And if you think of the cars that were around then versus now, in 20 years from now, you're right, there'll be a lot of EVs on the road. So the career path's important, the training's important, that the OEMs have an obligation to train, and I think they're doing a good job, but there's the how do you retain these people in the networks? But then there's the challenge of the other trades. The metal trades, or anything related to metal trades, where you are domiciled in a workshop, seem to be paid less than if you are in a building trade out on site. So you're out in the sunshine, you're in the rain as well, but you're getting the rewards financially. So sadly, it's the mechanics that are fitting the accessories to the 4x4 utes, the brand new ones, that the apprentice electricians, carpenters and bricklayers are getting to drive around in. So they feel like the poorer cousins from a trade perspective. And then you've highlighted a point which I thought was really strong. And it's this need and what the industry has evolved from or needs to evolve from if it hasn't already. And if your business hasn't done this, then you're in a lot of trouble. Many businesses would look at knowledge base. They would recruit on knowledge, they would reward on knowledge. So it was all about what you know. But then the more important part is the emotional intelligence. So knowledge versus the emotional intelligence is how can you connect with other people? Because people do business with people, whether it be internal customers, the pain in the ass mechanic that doesn't want to tell anyone how to fix things because they want to protect their knowledge. And we've all worked with that person because it's called job security, because they fear that they're going to, if everyone knows their skill base, they're redundant. But in fact, you need to be a team player. And this is where that whole emotional intelligence comes into play. And it's up to the dealer principals, the general managers, the service managers to enhance that and really grow that knowledge, that emotional intelligence with the knowledge base. That's how we're going to actually retain these people. Because they'll want to work in a place, in an organisation, in a in a setting that embraces all of that, those behaviours, and rewards those behaviours and rewards those individuals with recognition. So pretty important stuff. And going forward, the skills of embracing EV need to be done, but also recognising and retaining as much of the skills as possible with the current technology that's still going to be driven around for the next 20 years at least. So Tony, thank you. I look forward to reading your book, All the Pitfalls of a Journey of 40 Years in This Industry. I'm sure there is many a tale that anyone who's been associated with dealerships, service departments, or even customers will relate to very quickly and go, aha, yes, I've experienced that, or geez, I should have done that when I was in that particular situation.
So one advice, if I can just leave the listeners with, is if you ever have an opportunity to get a mentor, if you can afford a coach or somebody that can give you advice and that you can refer back to it as a young person, do it, because I did. And I tell you right now, and I'm glad I did. I had a lot of mentors in my life. And so do it. If you can, no one's alone. You know, people think, oh, I'm in this alone and everything else. And I just started a service manager roundtable forum for service managers that's in this game right now, following the success of this book, right? And I say to the people, I said, look, let's get around once every 2 weeks. We'll talk about what concerns, issues you have, stuff like that. And some really, really interesting topics come up. And I'll let these guys have it and let them have a powwow, because you get the veterans. I'm talking about people like myself that tell the young guys what to do. And then it's a real good mix of people, and it's globally, and it's people with different cultures and countries coming in. All I'm saying is, at the end of the day, take that 1% of advice from these people, and 1% of advice from anyone, I guess. It's going to help you. It's going to help you. It will definitely help me.
Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tony. It's such a good point. You need to be open to suggestions and advice and what's out there. So thanks very much. We enjoyed having you on the show.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you for listening today. Hopefully you got as much out of the show with Tony as what John and I did. It's a really interesting story, the challenge to attract and retain technicians into the workshops of our dealerships and our service departments.
If you've enjoyed what you've heard, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell below. Like us on LinkedIn. You can follow us on Facebook. You can also come to our website, autocurrents.com. We're also available on iTunes and Spotify.
Thanks for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time.